Alrighty, we're recording. So hello, my name is Lily. I am a fourth year mechanical engineering major, and I'm also one of the peer academic advisors for the School of Engineering. And today I will be moderating the Women in Engineering faculty panel. So let's get started by introducing our panelists. If we can go in order, maybe introduce your name, where you did your undergrad studies, your graduate studies, and your current department, that would be great. And then we can start with Professor Buswell.
Hello, everyone. Yes, I'm Natascha Buswell, and I'm currently in the Department of Mechanical and Aerospace Engineering here at UCI. And I've been here just over 4 years now. Did my undergraduate work at Syracuse University in aerospace engineering, and my graduate work at Purdue University in engineering education. So then I'll pass it off to Professor Lopour.
Hi, my name is Beth Lopour. I did my undergraduate studies in mechanical engineering at Northwestern University in Chicago. And then I did my graduate work also in mechanical engineering at UC Berkeley and started going more in the human neuroscience direction. So now I'm actually in the MAE Department here at UCI, and I've been here since about 2013.
Hi, my name is Bihter Padak. I am a faculty in mechanical engineering as well. My background is in chemical engineering, so I did my undergrad education in chemical engineering in Istanbul Technical University. And then I did master's in chemical engineering at Worcester Polytechnic Institute. And I did my PhD at Stanford University in energy resources engineering. And then I was a faculty in a chemical engineering department at University of South Carolina for a while, about 7 years. And then I joined UCI in 2018, and I've been here since then.
Wonderful, thank you so much. So we can start with our first question. What inspired you to become an engineer? And then anyone can go ahead and start, yeah.
I can start. So I think what I really liked about engineering was that when you studied engineering, it seemed like you got to learn how the world worked, how everything works, and how you can design or build things to make things work better, or to enhance things that are the way that the world already works. It's like a really general question, but it's why it drew me to mechanical engineering, because I was like, oh, this is how heat is transferred. This is how fluids flow, and you can see how that could apply to anything that you see around you. And so that was really what really struck my curiosity about engineering.
I can go next. For me, I love to tell this story, but it was really that I watched the movie Apollo 13 in my high school physics class, and I thought, oh, I want to do that. And so that was really what inspired me to become an engineer. And then I want to share as well that I kind of changed course to being an engineering education researcher, and I started loving that because I was a supplementary instruction facilitator, and I realized that was really what I loved doing, was teaching engineers rather than doing the actual engineering. So that's how I got to where I
am. So my journey sort of started with liking chemistry. I really enjoyed chemistry in high school, and I was in a chemistry camp. And so I wanted to do something related to that. And then I discovered chemical engineering, which then involved a lot of the design aspects and process design. So I thought that was really interesting, in addition to the chemistry aspect, the engineering aspects of it. So that's why I chose chemical engineering. And then I'm in mechanical engineering, so maybe I should explain that too. So my research is in combustion and reaction kinetics. So combustion research is usually done in mechanical engineering, even though we're using tools that are shared between chemical and mechanical engineering. So I'm sort of in the interface between both fields. So then I switched to mechanical because that's where my research belongs, really.
Wonderful, thank you. I see that Dr. Kia is on the call with us now. If you'd like, you can introduce yourself, mention what department you're in, where you did your undergrad studies, your graduate studies, and then if you'd like to, you can answer our first question, which is what inspired you to become an engineer?
So yeah, I just wanted to start with saying hi and apologizing for being late. Just left the meeting and I couldn't even go back to my office because it would be too late. Yeah, so I am Solmaz Kia. I am an associate professor with the Mechanical and Aerospace Engineering Department of UCI. And my research currently just the focus is on dynamical systems control. And more recently, I am gravitating towards doing more work on robotics, motion planning, and just a little bit like going from engineering to intersection of engineering and computer science and planning, algorithm designs. I did my bachelor's in Iran in Sharif University. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. So it's a technical university, and my bachelor's degree was in aerospace engineering. And my master's program also in the same university in flight dynamics and control. And then for my PhD, I came to the United States. I first went to University of Kansas. The reason for it was that, like you asked also what made you to become an engineer, I would say that mine wasn't very, it's just like inspiration. I was more like, I loved always math and physics at school. But then the reason I ended up as for example, aerospace engineer was that back in Iran, we had to take an entrance exam. And I knew that I want to do something related to math and physics. I can't do literature or things like that. I want to go to university. But then what happened is that we have to take this entrance exam and we have to list a bunch of majors that we want to basically study. We don't have much choices that, I'm going to be an electrical engineer. You list, you take the exam, and if you score well, you'll go to the choices that you have based on the rankings and other people's choices. So in this booklet, there was this aerospace engineering that wasn't basically very popular major back in Iran. Maybe it was like 3 or 4 years that they had it. I'm talking about a long time ago. I don't want to tell you guys how old I am, but it's just back in 97 when I was taking this entrance exam. So a long time ago, it was maybe 3 or 4 years that we had this aerospace engineering program in Iran. So just the name was so it's just like something that captured my mind. And I decided that I want to study aerospace because I fell in love with the name. And then I started, I liked it very much. And I was lucky that while I was doing my bachelor's degree, I ended up working for a small company that was working on flight simulators. And then I ended up for my master's program working on pilot modeling and how pilots just can be part of this system that you are controlling, how they respond, how can we mathematically capture the pilot's thinking and all of that. And then I came to United States to do my PhD in actually aircraft design. I was very much involved and just interested in flight dynamics and control. And I went to KU, but the person that I came for working with retired the year I arrived. John Rascom, he was just a aircraft designer who retired. And then because of that, the person that they brought in, the perspective was different than what I wanted. So I moved to UCI, and here my focus was on control. And then over the time I changed. So I don't want to just take too much of time, but over the time, basically my interest evolved, but always motivated with math and physics. But then things that I have done evolved over the time from flight dynamics and control. Now I'm in more robotics and planning and computer science domain. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think it's super interesting to see how your definition of an engineer evolved and changed. It wasn't solely this one person who does physics and math. It evolved into different specialties and different areas of interest. So that is very interesting to hear and very inspirational. Even though you said it wasn't inspirational, I think that
it's a little bit embarrassing just to say I became an engineer because aerospace sounded, especially in Persian, it sounded something very glamorous.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to study this field. And I was lucky to score and enter this program because they had only accepted 25. My class was 25 and another university had 25 students, the entire year around 50 students. So I was lucky. Yeah.
So our next question is going to be, how did you know academia was for you? And then anyone can go ahead.
Maybe I can go very quick. Basically, when I graduated my PhD, actually, I went to industry. Like I defended, I think maybe on Friday or something. And then the next week I started my job in a small company. And I was excited to go back to work on flight dynamics and control. But the thing is, when I got there, I found it very difficult that like everything was now owned by company. What I was doing, I was very much interested in publishing, going to conferences and sharing the knowledge, but especially in aerospace where we were working, even like some of the material we were doing, I couldn't share with anyone. So I just found it very different world that I didn't have much of a freedom that I have in academia on deciding what I want to do. So for me, I think I had this experience and I just found it that it's getting difficult. And even like for me, you know, when I wanted to choose job, I even asked my job to be part-time because I still couldn't just leave UCI. I wanted to teach. I did my PhD actually in UCI. So I ended up asking the company to let me work part-time with them so I could still go and teach and do research. But then I just saw this world is not for me. I cannot stay in the constraints of the company. So I went back and did a postdoc. And then after my postdoc, you know, I came back and become a faculty.
Yeah, I think for me, it's kind of like what we were talking about earlier with how our interests and even the definition of an engineer, or it evolves over time. And I think that's the way this was for me. There wasn't one specific moment where I knew it was for me, but it was, you know, this process of going through undergrad. I did the co-op program as an undergrad. And so I had a little bit of an experience of what industry was like. And I kind of had the same feeling of, that like, you know, maybe this environment is not what I'm looking for. And that kind of pushed me in the direction of research. And then all throughout grad school and my postdoc, I was like, I'm not really sure. I think I might like it, you know, but for me, it was this wanting to have this combination of research and teaching. I was excited about the teaching part. I wanted to do that. And for me, I was like, well, I don't know, like, I don't know about research, but the more I did it, the more I loved it. And the more I didn't want to give up either one of those two. And I saw academia as a way to be able to do both of them. So.
Since I was a kid, I always wanted to be a professor, not necessarily engineering back then, but I always wanted to be, you know, even when I was a little kid, I didn't even know if I really knew the meaning of what it is. I just, you know, met this professor and it just, you know, sounded so cool. And I said, okay, I want to be one day. And that evolved, you know, over the time. Then I, you know, got to know more. So during my undergraduate education, that's when I really decided, okay, this is what I would really like to do. And I did undergraduate research, which I really enjoyed. And I did 2 internships in industry, which I really did not enjoy. And I said, okay, maybe this is the right decision. I should really stay in academia and do research. I thought about maybe, you know, okay, if I like to do research, maybe national labs could be an option too, but I really like teaching too. So, you know, this is really the perfect job. I really enjoy teaching. I really enjoy research. So I don't regret my decision. I'm really happy. If I had another chance, I would become a professor again.
So I'm gonna kind of share an alternate perspective, I guess. I still don't know if academia is right for me. Something that I think about, you know, every so often of like, there's things that I find really challenging about it, but also things that I really love about it. But the thing that I really want to bring up I think that there's probably some undergrads here, maybe some graduate students too, but academia is wildly competitive, and it's really frustrating that a lot of people want to become professors, and it's not always something that you can just decide that you want to do. And so I think that that is just important to note, because first, for various reasons, some people will get a job in academia and some won't, and it often doesn't have to do with the person itself. But anyway, so I wanted to mention that, and now I'm trying to remember what my train of thought was. Oh, the other thing, especially in graduate school, so this is some of my research, is just that a lot of times it's the only pathway that's kind of really shown as like what you will do next. And so as graduate students, I think we're often, we're educated as PhD students in PhD granting universities. And so then you think that this is kind of the pathway that I want to go, is to become a professor at a research institution. But there's actually a lot of different pathways that you can go with PhDs, or even master's degrees or bachelor's degrees that maybe we don't talk about enough. So I don't know all the pathways, but I think it was really helpful for me to learn that there are other alternatives. And I think academia's kind of competitiveness has only really become so apparent in kind of like the recent decade or so. But I also, I think it is a really cool job. And when you get to meet others, like the other faculty here, you think, wow, that could be a great job for me. But I think it's kind of a complex decision. You might want to do it and it might not work out. And one last thing is that a lot of times people have to move to maybe a university that isn't going to be a good fit for them in order to have one of these jobs. And so I'm seeing a lot more of that, like, is that worth potentially being away from family? So that was a really kind of complex answer I just gave, but yeah, it's something I'm grateful to be a part of, and especially love getting to do the teaching. So that was the piece that I really wanted to do. And also, like, I think Professor Lopour said, wasn't sure about the research, but now I love my research, but it took me a while. I had to find the right research to do.
Thank you so much for all those answers. There's definitely lots of layers when it comes to choosing a career and a career path. And yeah, there's definitely lots to consider. And I'm glad you're bringing up not only the positives and the great experiences y'all have had in academia, but you're also bringing up like the intricacies that come with it. Just to get both sides of the coin and get all perspectives in. So then moving on to our next question is, what does a day in your life as a faculty member look like?
Okay, I can go next. Everyone is silent. This is a hard question. I mean, it changes every day, really. It depends on what we're working on. But for me, so I'm doing experimental research mostly, do some simulations too, but mostly lab work. And I spend a lot of time with my students because they're doing experiments in the lab. So I talk to them every day. And depending on how things are going in the lab, maybe I talk for half an hour versus 3 hours. So that really changes. And that's pretty much my priority. So depending on if things are going well, then I have time for doing other things. But then if they have troubleshooting issues, and then I spend more time with them, really. And then a lot of my time goes into writing proposals for research funding. That again depends on when I have a deadline. So sometimes I sit down and don't leave my desk for 3 days and I don't do anything else. I just write, including like I stay up all night sometimes. But then some days I just spend writing papers, editing papers. So I pretty much describe my summer when I'm not teaching, but when I'm teaching, then I spend a lot of time on teaching too. So preparing lectures, talking to students. I like to respond to an email when I receive an email from a student. So if I'm teaching a large class, then I spend a few hours, maybe sometimes just responding to student emails, answering questions. So it really, again, changes whether I'm teaching, whether it's summer, or again, if things are going well in the lab or not. But I guess I described a mix of things that I'm doing, it changes every day.
Yeah, I love this question. When I was a student, I thought that the only thing that my professors did was teach. I was like, well, they're just grading my work and they go back to their office and grade, and then why haven't they given me back my work? But it was when I was an undergrad that I realized that they actually do research. And so that was a really big eye opener for me, is that they spend a lot of time on teaching, but also have this whole other capacity to their work. And so, yeah, Professor Padak did a wonderful job explaining what a day looks like and how it varies. But that is one thing. I think it's both like a wonderful thing and sometimes a really challenging thing, is that it's so varied, and the flexibility sometimes can come back and bite you, because having all the flexibility of when you do things is wonderful. You get to design your days and often what it is you're doing. You get to write the proposals you want to do a lot of the time and within constraints, but then sometimes it can also be, hard to motivate yourself to get the work done that you want to get done, because there's not really anyone looking over your shoulder on a daily basis, especially when it comes to writing. So that's my thoughts on that. Still, every day it does seem different.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. The freedom of it is really sort of a defining aspect of this job. My husband is a physician, and it's like he sees his patients. Every patient has a note and have to order medications, right? And it's just, he has this list of 100 things he needs to do that day. And if he doesn't get it done in time, people are waiting on that, right? So it has to get done. And in this kind of a job, there is no one looking over your shoulder. And it was so weird to step into this job and like go to teach my first class. And I'm like looking around, like, isn't anyone going to check and make sure I'm doing this right? Like, is this okay? And so, you could literally not write any papers and not write any proposals, and you could get away with that for a little while, I guess. But ultimately, it has to be you making the decision of how you're going to spend your time, how you're going to prioritize things. And that's really, really challenging, because it takes a lot of sort of this internal drive that you have to pull from somewhere to get these things done.
I want to echo that I also was waiting for someone to like check on me during the first few months of my job. I kept thinking, don't I need to like ask my chair if this is okay? And I asked him, I think I asked one question about like if I could go to a workshop, and he looked at me like, yeah, I mean, anyway, felt very weird to have so much freedom, but now I'm pretty used to it.
I think everybody everyone's described like in different ways what I wanted to say. Probably what I can add is that just basically as a faculty, you're sort of running a company. It's just, it's a very different kind of thing that people look at. My dad sometimes asks like, what are you doing? And, or mostly what they can relate with is like teaching. They ask me, for example, how many courses you teach? And when I tell even like friends here that like, who have gone to university, right? They ask me, what do you do? How many courses you teach? And I tell them I teach one course. And they just think, oh, you probably are somebody they're keeping you busy there. Like, why are you teaching only one course? Because a lot of people, when think of professors, they just think that they are like instructors. But then what happens is that in reality, you're running a company. And if you want basically to be, a player in your community that you belong to, you really have to do many, many different things, like just writing this proposal, writing papers, like meeting with people, networking, meeting with your students, making sure like everybody is taken care of. It's just like, you can be very, very busy, or you can decide, okay, my company is going to go down. So you may just reduce the workload. But for me personally, it's very hectic, and you are in different stages of your careers in this faculty job. If you are assistant professor, you are basically swamped with work, because there's a lot of expectation that you have to meet just so you could get your tenure, and you say, okay, now I have my job and I can have a little bit of an ease of mind and do things. Then you become an associate professor, you're mid-career, you're not still, just, there's a lot to learn still, right? So it's still, you're doing a lot of things, and then you become professor, the expectation then again grows. As a professor, you have to have significant contributions. Then, the workload could change, but then in all of that, you can also decide if you don't mind, as I said, your company sink and become a one-person company, which is just you, then you can adjust the workload. But if you want to have a significant impact, you have a busy life. So
Thank you so much for sharing. I think as an undergrad, at least at the beginning, I was like, yeah, my professors, they just teach, right? And then little by little, I started realizing like, no, they have other responsibilities beyond just like being my lecturer. They have grad students, they have their own research, the proposals, the writing and publication. And as I started to like dive into that side of academia, I've realized there's a lot of writing that occurs behind the scenes in order to get published. So all power to y'all for enduring that and having fun with it, with your research. Going into our next question, was there a specific experience that was personally affirming to you? So that could be whether it is in academia or in your undergrad, graduate school, something that very much like empowered you as an engineer.
Yeah, I can start with this one because there was definitely a sort of specific experience that really changed my course. And that was in my undergraduate research. So I had done an undergraduate research project my last year, and I was talking to, or I guess it must have been my junior year, because I was thinking of applying to graduate school, and I was talking to my advisor, and I was kind of saying like, yeah, I think I'll apply here, and I kind of listed some schools, and he was like, no, these are the schools you need to apply to. And he was listing all of these ones that I thought I was not good enough to get into. And he was like, you need like, and it was definitive, like, you need to apply to these. And I'm like, oh, okay, glad I asked. But like, it really changed the course for me. If he hadn't said it that directly, and if I hadn't asked, I wouldn't have known. And so, yeah, I try to make sure I have these conversations with my students as well, so that I can kind of pay that forward.
For me, I guess it was getting the job in academia. I guess Natascha mentioned, Professor Buswell mentioned that how competitive it is to get a job in academia. And to be honest, I didn't think I would get it, as a grad student. Before graduation, there's all these uncertainties, you're going to graduate, you don't know what you're going to do. You have, hopes, you want to be a professor or maybe work in industry, but at the time where you're looking for the job, that uncertainty is a really challenging time. And I was thinking to do a postdoctoral study before I even apply for faculty positions. And that's usually expected in the field, that professors do a postdoc before coming in. And my advisor said, you should apply now. Probably you won't get it, but you will get the experience at least for submitting the application. And if you get it, you can always do a postdoc and tell them I'll start in a year. So if she didn't say that, I wouldn't even apply. And I got my first interview and I got that job. So if she didn't actually, motivate me, then I wouldn't even think about applying. I wouldn't even think that I would get the job. So that for me, I guess, getting this job was the biggest, I guess, challenge, but then also the biggest happiness of my career, I would say.
Yeah, I had another kind of similar event where we talked about mentoring a couple weeks ago. And I think that is even showing up right now, like having really like mentors that are, and someone brought up at that event, the difference between a mentor and a sponsor, and like having someone that's really sponsoring you and saying, like kind of guiding you and reaffirming you is just invaluable. I mean, it can really set you on a different course and make a big difference to you. And so that's actually something I think about a lot too, is like, what can I say to students that's really going to help them recognize their strengths and their their value and their contributions. So I really love that those stories were the ones that the two of you shared. I'm still trying to think about one specific example for me. I think my PhD experience as a whole was especially affirming for me. I always felt a little bit odd for not loving aerospace engineering to the point that I wanted to do a PhD in aerospace engineering. I felt like, oh, I should. I kind of got into this thought of that's what I should be doing, but I really loved teaching and I wanted to think about that and think about how to support students. And I thought there must be some sort of trajectory to becoming a professor where I get to focus on the education of engineers. And I found the program at Purdue in engineering education. And that was really, like, it made me feel like I wasn't weird for having that as my big interest. Being in that program just really affirmed my interests and that my research and my goals in that field were legitimate and that other people cared about them too. And just becoming a researcher, becoming an academic, a scholar, all of that was affirming, and to be in that program was as well. So it's a great question. Thanks for the others answering it too. I love hearing these stories. I do interviews as my main research methodology, and so I love these kinds of events to hear other people's experiences and what makes them who they are and how they got there. So thanks.
So I think out of the questions so far, this is the most difficult one. I'm just thinking, just like through my journey, and just like Natascha, I kind of think of it like a particular experience or particular defining moment. What I think about when I think and look back on my journey, it's just like a lot of things happened to me, right? It's just like, I left, for example, my job to come back to academia. It's just a very scary decision, right? It's just like you have an opportunity you have a job. So then giving up that job and then going back to another uncertain situation, starting as a postdoc and, just working your way out. Sometimes you want to do this thing, but you don't have the courage to create this perturbation in your life. But when I look back, I was always lucky that usually an unfortunate events happen and push me towards like what I should do, that maybe I don't have necessarily the courage to do it. Like in particular case of my job, right? I wasn't happy, and because of that, I was keeping my job part-time, and I was giving away a huge salary, but it was just between these two worlds. And then what happened was that our company was a small company, for example, just sharing an experience. Like small company, and we lost a grant because government, I think, cut one of the big projects. And then sort of I lost my job because it was just a very small company in aerospace area. And then what happened is I was pregnant at the moment, and I was just thinking, I am pregnant, I lost my job, and I'm gonna go to interview, and who would give me a job, right? I was swollen already in 3 months, or it just, and I was just thinking, who's gonna give me a job? So for a while, I didn't even apply. I just stayed with my research and continued. But then after my daughter was born, when she was like 4 months or very small, I had this opportunity for doing the postdoc and also staying in UCI as an adjunct professor just to teach. But then what happened was that for me, I think my husband pushed me that like, oh, you cannot just stay here. If you want to be a professor, you cannot be just like a adjunct and have a temporary. We'll pack up and go, for example, to San Diego, and you'll do a proper postdoc and then apply for jobs. So a lot of things happened, and when I'm looking back in all of these journey, when some of these unfortunate things were happening initially, I was always in the company of people that were just supporting me and helping me throughout making these transitions. So I think in your career, it's very important to be lucky to be in the company of good people, and also maybe try to create that network that when something happens, those people could help you and support you. And for me, I think that was the most luckiest thing that I have, maybe not defining moment, but always these little things with these good people to support me.
Can I add something? I was moderating a panel actually last Friday in a similar setting. And one of the panelists mentioned that in addition to having mentors, you need to have accelerators. This is the first time I'm hearing this word being used in this context. An accelerator is someone who would tell you, you need to go apply for this, you need to do this, like these big decisions in your life that changes your career. Accelerator is the person who tells you to do that. So I've really enjoyed this, and I'm going to keep using this, or telling this to my students moving forward. You need to have accelerators in your life.
Definitely. And to add on to that, Professor Kia is saying you can also kind of curate the people that are around you that are going to support you and accelerate your goals and remind you what your goals are and your dreams, right? And so remembering that you're in, for a lot of, not in every sense, but you are in control in some senses, right? There's lots of institutional systemic things going on, but you can decide who you surround yourself with, and that definitely is an important thing to remember.
Thank you so much. I feel so inspired to hear that there's so much support in academia and that y'all have been experiencing like the effects of great mentorship and accelerators. I love that term so much. Moving forward, sometimes when it comes to academia and its competitiveness, we may feel a glimpse of imposter syndrome. So I want to know, was there a specific moment when you felt like you didn't belong? And then how you kind of combated that? Because I know that's something that even as a freshman, as a senior, as a grad student, you probably experienced and had to endure.
I think for me as a female faculty, I think this this self-doubt thing, it was there for me when I started, and I feel like it was real. It wasn't like just like in my head, like interacting with students and like mostly students and even maybe the faculty, the colleagues, but mostly with the students. I think it took a while for students to take you seriously, right? All these things that you hear, like maybe in social media or as a cliche that how you dress, how you conduct yourself, for female really matters. I felt like at the beginning, the students weren't taking you seriously. I was very conscious about how am I dressing or how am I projecting myself. I changed. I wear sneakers and sport clothes, and I wear, like, for example, I carry backpacks and all of that, right? Even now. But then at the beginning, for a little while, at the very beginning, I changed. Like I was wearing high heels and just proper bag and all of that, because I felt maybe that is really necessary to help people to imagine you in your role. But over the time, I think like in a couple of years, things changed, right? And it was to the point that I didn't even I went back to wearing my sneakers and sport clothes and everything, and not worrying much. But I think this was there and it was real. It wasn't like something in my head. I had to really work hard to be at the point that now, people take you seriously. And maybe this is unfortunate part of, female professionals, but I'm hoping that the new generation, things are getting better. I'm talking about maybe 8 years ago when I started in here. I don't know how life is now, but I just wanted to say honestly that it was real, not something in my head.
Yeah, when I read this question, I think I think that I feel this way a lot. And I think the reason I answered the last question with the affirming experience of my PhD was because that was when I truly felt like I belonged. I felt like my interests were valid. And so having had that experience, now going forward, I kind of know when maybe someone else might not think I belong, but that I know that I do, sort of a thing. And so I totally agree with Professor Kia on there are a lot of instances where it's not imposter syndrome, right? It's really that like others really don't think that you belong. And a lot of the experiences she described of how do you present yourself and the fact that you're thinking about it a lot. And so Professor Kia was one of 2 faculty members that were female when I joined the department. And now we have an additional, I think, 3 other female faculty. And so we have the largest group we've ever been in our department, which is really exciting, but we're still the minority. We're still, I think, not even a quarter of the faculty in total. And so, I mean, it becomes apparent a lot. And so I definitely think that now more people have seen me as a professor, that it's not as apparent. I'm ready to kind of push back on it a little bit more than I was at the beginning, where I knew that the question would come, but the first time someone really doesn't think that you're the professor, it's still just really shocking. And so that's definitely come up quite a lot. I do have a specific a moment where I really felt like, oh no. So it was when I was finishing my senior year and I had applied to grad school. And it was after I submitted my applications for grad school, but before I had gotten any acceptance letters, I decided I wasn't going to do the honors program in my university because it wasn't like the project wasn't a good fit for me and it wasn't bringing me joy. And so I decided I wasn't going to do it. And I remember when I got my first admission into a PhD program and I thought, oh my gosh, but they don't know that I am not doing that project anymore. And I probably don't deserve to have gotten accepted because I quit that project. And it was just, I mean, now that I say it out loud, it seems so absurd, but it felt so like that was one of those times internally where I thought that I didn't belong, that they don't have all the details, right? I was an imposter, but thankfully, I think I talked with one of my mentors and the only female faculty member at my undergraduate institution when I was there in my department, and she said, oh, that doesn't matter. People change what they're doing all the time, right? Like even in grants, you sometimes write what you're going to do, and then circumstances change, and that's okay as long as you explain kind of what happened. So yeah, so those are some of my experiences with this idea of belonging.
Yeah, so I definitely agree with all of the sort of examples that have been given, and the feeling, when you first start your job and everyone's mistaking you for a student. But I wanted to share an example from when I was a student, since I'm assuming that most of the audience members here are students as well. So when I was a student, I feel like it took me a long time to get things, like longer than anyone else. Any course that had sort of quizzes midway, I never did well, but by the final, I had it all figured out, right? And so every once in a while, I would kind of ask, I'm like, am I the only one who feels like this? And I would ask somebody else, like, hey, that lecture that we just saw, like that was really tough, right? Like, did you understand that? And and of course, so I was in mechanical engineering, so the majority of my classmates were men, and they would be like, oh yeah, no, I got that. And I'm like, oh, okay, it is just me. I'm the only one that doesn't understand this for some reason. And then I remember a moment where I actually followed up on it, and they were like, yeah, I understood that. And I'm like, oh, what did the professor mean when they said, blah, blah, blah. And they were like, I don't really know that. And I was like, oh, I should have been asking this all along. Like, no, they're just saying they understand. They probably don't understand any more than me. And so, yeah, so that was a specific instance where I really felt like I didn't belong. And then I was like, oh, maybe I'm just assuming things and assuming that I don't belong. And that's not really the way it is.
For me, it's a little different because, I come from a chemical engineering background and I did my undergrad in Turkey. Our class, maybe more than half was female students. So it's a different environment. And in fact, so in our mechanical engineering department, there were few female students, a lot of male students. Chemical engineering was the opposite. So men in our class were feeling, okay, am I doing the right thing here? So in my case, I had a very, I guess, positive experience in that sense. I never questioned why am I in that class. And then moving forward along my academic journey, I guess maybe I was fortunate to be in a department where female professors were, felt very welcome, and I never felt like I didn't belong. So maybe not like I didn't belong, but like an experience I didn't enjoy. Like I said before, when I did an internship in industry, not that I didn't feel belong, but I really didn't enjoy it. So that's probably when I said, okay, I really need to be in academia. And since I made that decision, I feel I'm in the right place. I feel.
All I have to say is you are all so inspiring. I will also like to say that as a student who is on all the Discords, whenever any of your names pops up, people have nothing but amazing things to say. So I think that should be like a level of affirmation that you are creating a positive impact on these students' education. And whenever people are like, oh, this professor is teaching this class, everyone gets super excited. They're like, I'm definitely going to take it with them. So I just want to put that out there as a student. People are very appreciative of the effort you put into all of your lectures and all of your courses. But moving on to our next question, how have you confronted or dealt with feeling overlooked?
Okay, this is a difficult question. So that's why everybody's pausing. And it is, I mean, it depends on the situation, but how you deal with really, again, depends on the situation. But what I want to emphasize is what you do afterwards. So whenever you're in a situation like this, I feel like I try not to make it a negative experience for me and not to make me feel down. So it happens, it's going to happen wherever you are in your career, whether you're in industry or academia. I just try not to affect it to my whole experience. And, I try to look at the positive things. So maybe that's what I can say.
Yeah, I think one way that you can deal with this is something that we talked about earlier, is kind of having this community around you that is supportive. I still feel like in my field and as a professor, there are certain areas or certain groups of people where I probably will always be overlooked, and it's like, that's all right, because I have my community where I know I'm appreciated and I'm respected, and I'm included. And I am happy about that, and that is fulfilling for me, and that's enough for me. And so it makes it hurt a little bit less, I think. And I think one thing to keep in mind about that is that takes a lot of time to figure that out, and it can be rough when you're just kind of testing it out, right? You're experimenting, and you're like, oh, no, that interaction wasn't so great. Let's try over here. And even as a faculty member, it took me kind of a long time to find that community. And so, even if things aren't going great right away, it does take time and some effort and a little bit of luck sometimes to really feel settled in that way.
So for me, I think as Beth was saying, it's very difficult, like to. I was just thinking about it, maybe a experience that I had, right? And maybe I was lucky to be in good company, like as Beth was saying, that like you don't feel, isolated and just, world is going on and nobody, you're left behind. I never had that kind of feeling. What I wanted to say was not that this feeling cannot be real. What I wanted to say was that sometimes this feeling of overlooked comes from your expectations. And as a faculty, I was just, the reason I was late, I was in a talk by a senior faculty who is visiting our department, and he was giving this talk that, he was talking about research that he did even before I was born, right? And then what I do in my day-to-day life is that, like, I look at my research or where I am, and I keep comparing myself to someone, for example, the senior faculty or other people that have been in the field for a number of years. And I put that expectations on myself that, why I wasn't chosen for this job, why I wasn't given this opportunity, and so on, right? Sometimes part of this is that maybe we are expecting too much from ourselves because we keep comparing ourselves to our colleagues, but we forget that, this person I am comparing myself to is here because of 20 years, 10 more years of experience compared to me. So I need to remind myself like that, I go sometimes, and because of this comparison, I come back and become very upset that why I am not like this. Now I've learned just to remind myself that just remember, over the time, just think about what you will be in 20 years from now. It's just that helps me sometimes to overcome some of these emotional aspects of our job, because there's a lot of comparison going on in our job. As a faculty, you're not going, it's just like, it's very different than the 9 to 6 kind of job in industry that you've given a job and you do it and you go, and for us, we have to create a lot of things for ourselves, and we keep comparing ourselves. So there's a lot of emotional toll attached to this job, and just knowing to look at the situation from the right perspective, and seeing this history that other people that you're comparing yourself to, it helps, at least for me, to handle situations like this.
Yeah, that's really helpful to hear. I'm getting advice as well from you all. So one other thing that I wanted to talk about was having your corner, having your group that you really feel validated by is awesome. And one of the hardest times to feel like you're overlooked is when it happens within that own group. And so I just want to share one story about a paper. I had been mentoring one of our postdoc with others as well, and working on this, like a study design and paper design. And then I went on leave. And while I was on leave, the paper got put together, and I checked in on it at one point, and they're like, "Oh, we're almost ready to submit it," but I wasn't on the author list, right? And so that was something that was for me really hard, because I had been really involved with it, and I remember thinking, "Oh, well, maybe I don't deserve to be an author because I was on leave," and those sorts of thoughts. Like, I felt really overlooked. And so I talked with some, friends, not with that group, but other friends, and recognize that I needed to, even though it was really uncomfortable, I needed to bring it up and say, I need to be an author on this paper because I contributed a great deal. And it was fine, right? Then they were like, "Oh, good point, right? We'll put you on the author list." Oftentimes that can feel really overwhelming. It's not always a clear answer, right? Sometimes it's not like there's a solution. And so coming up with ways to kind of move forward is also important, which a lot of the other panelists here talked about. So and then rejection is a huge part in academia, right? So there's this thing, I mentioned this in my classes, there's some people have created what's called a failure CV, and it was popularized by a really famous scientist that probably had been an academic for like 40 or 50 years and had great successes. And the point was to show people that for every grant or award he had won, he had applied for like 10 additional ones. And so he had this big CV saying, here's all the things I applied to and didn't get. And that was something that was really helpful to know, right, that even though this person had a career that's much longer than mine, they also had a lot of things that they didn't earn. And it can feel so personal, especially with research, when it's your idea or you're so excited about it. And so that's, I feel like, one of the other big challenges is to have your ideas rejected or not awarded or something like that can feel personal, and not just because of all the time you put into it, but because they're your ideas. So those are some thoughts that I have about feeling overlooked.
I really like the idea of a failure CV. I wrote that down because I think oftentimes we only look at what's showcase, like all of these great responses, great awards that these individuals have gotten and received, and we neglect to acknowledge all the work and all the potential failures they had to go through in order to receive that. And to kind of combat that and help with like the imposter syndrome that may come with like rejection, I went to a graduate visitation, and one of our workshops was about just imposter syndrome. And they mentioned having a happy folder where you put all like your little successes in there. So kind of like a failure CV, but on the more like, oh, look at all of I've accomplished, because oftentimes we don't give ourselves enough credit for what we have accomplished and what we have done. So having the contrast between the two is super great to put things into perspective. So I really like that idea. And on a more positive note, oh, go ahead.
I just wanted to shortly say, I put in the chat the link to that CV. I couldn't remember who it was, but, and maybe there's more, but this is the one I remember seeing. So if you want to check out what this faculty member did not get, I think it'll make you feel a little bit better.
Yes, thank you for sharing. I know I for sure will be investigating and going through that and kind of snooping. But like I was saying, going on a more positive note, what was one of your most enjoyable classes or projects or experiences throughout your academic journey?
I just recently thought about this, and so I'll share. One of my really, I feel like it's been one of the greatest things about my time at UCI so far is my very first class that I taught here is a graduate level class on engineering teaching. And in that class, I had this one student who, so one more detail is that I assign the students to create a hypothetical class that they would maybe one day want to teach, and they have to figure out what the topics are, who the intended students are, what assignments they would give, and that sort of thing. So they have to come up with all the details of a hypothetical class. And one of the students in that first year designed a class called The Magic of Engineering. And it just seemed awesome. She wanted it to be for non-engineers to really introduce them to engineering and help with science literacy. And she got to teach it. I was the co-instructor this past fall. And so that was just one of my, it was such an awesome experience to see really that come full circle and how much joy it brought her to actually get to put something into place that she had been creating and nurturing. And so that was, mentorship and seeing others succeed has been just one of the best parts of this job. So that was my story.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Seeing my students do well is like a very unexpected and rewarding part of this job. You think about just the papers and the grants and then the teaching, right? And but when my first PhD student graduated and got the job, got the postdoc that she wanted, I was like, wow, it was unexpected. But for me personally, in my own journey, the one that really sticks out in my mind is the first neuroscience class that I took. And that's because, up until that point, I had been doing just straight up mechanical engineering. And I was kind of given this opportunity to work on a neuroscience project. And I was like, okay, imposter syndrome kicks in, right? I'm like, I don't know anything about neuroscience. I'm like, what am I going to do about it? I'm going to take the undergrad neurobiology course. So I was a third-year grad student, and I took this undergrad course with all the pre-meds, and I was just fascinated. Like, I loved it, and I was like, I was starting to see how I could combine that with the other things I had learned to do something that was really exciting to me personally. And so that class was really sort of transformative for me.
Maybe I can quickly, I know you said that you want to switch to a positive note, but it's something very interesting that I was just looking again. I can't pinpoint any particular moment that was more enjoyable than the other. It's just that every single paper, working with the students and all of that, it's all have been very, very enjoyable for me. And, if you look at me, I look so tired these days because of so many things going on and having a 2-year-old and, just kids and just working from home with kids. It's not easy thing, but I'm so, tired many times. And people see me and they always tell me, you need a vacation, you need a vacation. And I just tell them, no, I don't need a vacation, because if I go to vacation, I'm going to have extra stress, because what I need is a peaceful moment to come and sit in my office and work, because that makes, all these things that I am working on, actually, they bring joy to me. And it's just, it could be a little bit consuming, because life is also happening and you have other responsibilities, and the fact that you feel like, oh, I enjoy this, and then when I do other things, they take the joy from my life. It's not sometimes a good experience. So I know you wanted this to be positive, but I just wanted to bring up this part of it, that sometimes when you have a rewarding job or you find something that you really love to do, you get too consumed in the work, right? And then you have to also create this balance between your personal life, your family, and your work. And this could be at times a little bit hard for you. Having said that, I just wanted also to say that I have to take off just to go back to my office and get ready for my class. So it was a pleasure being part of this group and really enjoyed it. And yeah, so I'll see you all maybe in other occasions. Okay, bye everyone.
I agree with the previous comments. I think teaching and mentorship is the most rewarding part of this job. And like mentioned earlier, research can come with rejections. You submit a proposal, you submit a paper, it might get rejected. Maybe on your third try, you get it funded. But with teaching, everything you do is rewarding, and same for mentorship. So for me also, I think the most memorable memory or experience was the graduation of my first PhD student. That was a huge achievement and was very emotional too. I still remember that graduation ceremony, and also your students become part of your family. I mean, I call them my kids, right? Because I talk to them all the time, and we spent 5 years together, pretty much talking every day. So when they leave, you really miss them after they leave. So for me, the graduation of my, again, first PhD student, that was the most memorable experience.
Alrighty, we're getting close to the end. I'm gonna move into this question. What is the most important lesson you've learned from your career thus far?
I think I can start with this one, and there's definitely more than one thing, but I think one of the things that you've probably seen or heard from all of the stories we've been telling is that your career is a constant evolution, and you know, especially when you're graduating from undergrad and you're getting your first job and you're kind of thinking like, you know, this choice is going to affect the rest of my life. And it feels like so, you know, so important, and it is important. But what I tell students a lot is you never know how things are going to change. And, you know, would I have ever predicted that I would be working in neuroscience? No, I had no idea. And I would have thought it was too late, right? I was already in graduate school getting a PhD in mechanical engineering. You can't switch to neuroscience at that point. Oh, well, it turns out you can. Maybe not recommended to wait that long if you know that's what you want to do, but it can work out. And so I think that's the important thing that I've learned, is that I'm still evolving. I'm still doing things where I'm kind of pushing the edges of like what I know, and then I'm learning more. And so, you know, and we've seen from the other panelists that this is true for them as well. So just, you know, kind of, you know, keep that in mind, and think about the skills that you're learning, how those might be applied in different ways, what your interests are and how that intersects with those skills. And that can kind of give you an idea of like the whole range of things that might be open to you.
So something that I think has been really important for me to learn is kind of how my career is just one part of me. And so even though I know we're talking about our careers here, I think that has, I did this thing through the National Center for Faculty Development and Diversity called the Faculty Success Program. And one of the things that they really teach in that is to make sure that you're taking care of yourself, and you know, other things on your calendar, that like going to the grocery store or sleeping, right, and hobbies are really important too. So I think that learning that has been really important for me, and prioritizing those things. And so I think about that quite a lot, and just recognizing kind of the balance. And if I'm rested and doing other things that bring me a lot of joy, then I can be a better professor and I can be a better researcher. And so that's not always totally apparent to me in the middle of something where I'm feeling like there's so much going on and I have to work and I have to do more and more, but I'm trying to listen to that more and more as I've been going on. Something that I kind of say to myself, and which is kind of silly, but helps me, is that work won't love you back. It's people love you, right? And so I think about that quite a lot, is like, is it really worth me like staying up late instead of doing something fun? Or can I do this to a different standard? Or can I ask for an extension? So those are all things that I'm practicing moving forward. I think it'll help me have a longer career in the long run.
You know, I've been thinking since the slide showed up, I still don't have a single answer. So, but I guess maybe what I can, well, there are several things, but the most I think useful was that over the time, when I look back, like when I started, so I've been a professor over 10 years now, and comparing myself now to then, I think over the time I've learned to pick my battles, because there's so much going on in this job and you have a huge to-do list, and some of the things can be really consuming my energy, even though they won't be helpful for me in any way, but I still have to do those. And there are sometimes arguments that I'm part of which won't benefit me at all, and I still find myself arguing with people about those issues. And you know, that's what I mean by picking my battles. So if it's not gonna benefit me or my students in any way, then I just remain quiet. That's been my, I think, biggest change since I started this career.
Wonderful. And then here we go into our last prepared question, which is, what is one piece of advice you have for younger women in engineering?
Do what you love. I tell this not just for women engineers, for everyone, for all of my students, I say this all the time. Whatever you do, you have to pick something that you really enjoy. Otherwise, you'll be miserable for the rest of your life, really. I mean, if you want to be a professor, if you want to be, engineer in industry, or you decide that engineering is not for you, which is totally okay. I mean, you can do a PhD in engineering and change your mind. So just actually yesterday, I found out one of my colleagues in the same research field, I found out that after, to be honest, I don't even know how old she is, definitely over 50, she started writing fantasy novels. And she just published this trilogy recently about this wolf in a den. I mean, which is amazing, right? I mean, you, even after a certain time in a field, you can say, okay, this is not for me and I want to do something else, and totally go for it. So whatever you enjoy, just do that.
Love that. And I'm so glad. I don't know if we've talked about this before, but I mean, with me and Professor Padak, but I also always tell my students, it's okay if you don't want to be an engineer. And I think that they always kind of find that surprising, where I'm like, if you take this class and you learn that you don't want to be an engineer, like that's a great piece of information. So I agree. Definitely do what you want. And also time doesn't, I think we often think it's too late or something like that, but something that I also think about often is the phrase, the time will pass anyway. And so oftentimes you'll say, oh, I can't do that. That's going to take me too long. But it's like the time's going to pass anyway. Why don't you start working on whatever it is that you're interested in trying? But the other piece of advice is, I've given like more than one piece now, but is to make sure that you find your people and find those that make you feel good and support you. So there's, community is so important, even in your classes, right? And you can have different groups of, your people, but that's just so important.
Yeah, so I agree with that, things take time, and things can take time to settle in when you start something new. And then I would say the other thing that I've given to my own students, and it's not all of them, but some of them seem to have this idea of, well, I don't know if I'm good enough for that, or I don't know if I'll get that, and it stops them from trying. And it's like, well, why would you just assume that you're not, like apply and see if you get it? Apply for that program, apply for that job. And it's okay to feel, you might feel that way, and that's valid and okay to recognize, but then just pretend you don't and submit the application and see what happens. Make them tell you no, okay, then that's another piece of information. You can make a new plan going forward, but never assume it. If you assume that and you don't apply, you will never get it. That's pretty much the only certainty, right?
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. That does conclude the end of our prepared section or prepared questions. There is a feedback form. If y'all could scan the QR code and answer a few questions about the panel, but I will open it up to all of our attendees in the case that y'all have questions. Now is the time to ask all of the professors or one specifically. So feel free to unmute yourself, but if you do not feel comfortable with that, you are welcome to use the chat feature and I will vocalize the question.
Hi, I don't have a question, but I just wanted to echo this. It is really difficult to be a woman in engineering, and just period, that sentence alone. But I've had a couple female professors up until now. I'm only a second year, and every time I'm in one of those classes, I just feel like I belong so much more. So I don't know. I just hope that affirmed y'all a little bit. And I think this panel helped me realize that, we're all people, and everyone has hardships, even if they're like a teacher or professor or whatever. So that's something I learned today. But I just wanted to echo that y'all are so inspiring, and thank you for all the courage you have and all the work that you do. And yeah, that's the questions were amazing, Lily. But yeah, that's that's what I had to say.
This is what I've meant by, teaching being rewarding. So hearing something like this makes my day or my entire year. So, this is a great affirmation to hear and, feel that I belong in this job. So thank you for that comment.
I do have a question. Something that was mentioned briefly around the middle of the questions was family and having the balance between your work and having time for your family and investing time into that. How did y'all manage your time, especially with like the flexible hours that was mentioned prior?
First, I would not recommend having a new child during a pandemic. So that's actually not in our control always, right? But that's been the hardest part. Yeah, I think some of you may have seen my daughter jumped in for a minute. She's here at home again because she has some sort of virus. So my husband's taking her to the pediatrician. But I think the balance piece, it's just a constant evolution. And I think what I mentioned a few questions ago was just the trying to figure out prioritizing which ones are most important and making sure that I take time to rest and recharge myself. There's another phrase you hear all the time that you can't pour from an empty cup, right? And that's so true. Even sometimes though, like getting to do work, right? And really, this is kind of a roundabout question. I think about this all the time. I should have a better answer, but having a partnership and like if you're, able to parent with two parents, right? Like that has been really helpful, but recognizing that I want to work and getting to have the time to work on that sometimes also fills my cup and reminding me that I'm potentially more than just at the beginning when I had my kid, all I felt like I was just a milk maker. And like, yeah, so anyway, those are some of my immediate thoughts. I think about this all the time, but it's definitely a balance. I'd love to hear from the others too about how they find balance.
Yeah, so this is definitely a tough one. I guess just a little bit of background in case there are undergrads who are not really familiar with this process. So if you start as a new faculty at like an institution like UCI, you basically have anywhere from 5, 6, 7 years or so, it depends on the institution, where you basically have to prove yourself. You have to have enough papers, enough grants, enough students, good teaching evaluations, you do service for the university, and then you go up for tenure. If you pass whatever bar they set, then you get tenure, and you're kind of like, it's a bit of security in your job that yes, they want you to stay at this institution. And so unfortunately for women, this comes in the time of your life when a lot of women are having children or wanting to have children. And so you have this huge pressure on both sides for family and your job. You want to do everything you can for your job to get tenure because it's a one-time thing, essentially, right? Like you go for it and you get it or you don't. And so there's this huge pressure to just put all of that effort into your work. And I think, so I had a child when I was on the tenure track about 3 years in. And I think I tried to keep reminding myself, this is important to me. And I'm going to live my life in a way that I'm okay with, right? Spending, whatever time with my family I need to. And if I can't do enough work to get tenure, then that's not the job for me. I'm not willing to make that sacrifice. And so if I don't get tenure, well, then I had a great, 6 years at UCI. I did some good stuff there, and I need to find something else that's a better fit for me. And so it was constant, like me trying to remind myself of this because you're getting pulled in all these different directions. But that was the one thing for me that really was like, okay, no, this is my family is my priority. And then I hope that this job matches it, basically. Oh, and it did. I got tenure. So I guess I should give the ending to the story.
Actually, I think I remember when you got tenure. It was like when I had just started here and there was an assistant professor gathering, and there was like, I think that was when I first met you. But anyway, I really appreciated you sharing that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm the right person to answer this because I'm still struggling to find that balance, and I have a little baby at home, which I had during the pandemic, and not having childcare and trying to work. It does make things really difficult. But I guess I've attended a lot of, when I first started my career, I've attended a lot of time management workshops, and I think that the most common thing that I heard was, make a to-do list and keep updating it. So I have a really long to-do list where I prioritize things, because I won't be able to do all of them, but I keep adding to it. But then also I keep categorizing them. Okay, this I really have to do today or this week versus this can wait till 2 days later. So that's how I try to manage things and try to find, I guess, maybe peace with the fact that I won't get to do all of them, but at least I will do the ones that are most important, and some will have to wait. So I'm still working on that, but that's my advice, I think, to people who are trying to balance things.
Thank you. We have 3 more minutes left in case anyone has some last minute questions. If not, we can wrap up early. I think we may be good. Again, I just want to say thank you all for coming. Thank you to the panelists. As I've been reiterating this whole time, you are all super inspirational. And as someone who is trying to pursue potentially a faculty position in the future, there was so much insight and so much information that was invaluable. So I really thank you for taking the time out of your day to be a part of this panel. And hopefully this recording will reach a greater audience so that more people can hear your stories and feel just as inspired as well. With that being said, I'm going to end the recording.
Great job, Lily, too, facilitating.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This is probably one of my favorite panels from the year, and I've been attending this panel for the past 4 years. So it's great being able to go from being an attendee to planning the event and moderating it. But again, thank you all for coming. I'm going to stop the recording before I forget.